Welcome to State of Affairs. I'm Steve Adubato. We're coming to you from the Agnes Varus NJTV studio in Newark. We're pleased to welcome Sue Altman, who is State Director of New Jersey Working Families, which is
an awesome organization dedicated to progressive causes.
You were ready for that?
Yeah.
Okay, let's get right into progressive causes. And people want to find out more, we'll put up your website, Twitter handle, et cetera.
Great.
Progressive causes defined as, okay, first on the list, do you put the millionaire's tax hike on another millionaire's tax, top of the list?
Another millionaire's tax?
Okay, beyond the one that's existing right now, at a higher level.
So when you say the top of the list, what do you mean?
Of all the progressive items,
yes.
Millionaire's tax increase?
Well, I think funding progressive issues is a priority, and having a budget that's a value statement that puts forth funding for progressive issues is a top priority for me. And so revenue needs to be part of that conversation. And a millionaire's tax, which is a tax on every dollar made over $1 million of just 2 cents, so it's not net worth of $1 million, it's just people making over $1 million, is a good way to raise revenue.
You know, we've had the Senate president here. We've had the Republican leader in the Assembly, John Bramnick, and others, business leaders, said, you know what? Sounds easy enough. A lot of people are supporting it. Some question it, but public polls check them out, what they say. There are a lot of folks who say this.
Yeah, it's got a huge support.
Okay, but what about the practical problem, which they raise is, you raise taxes on certain millionaires over $1 million, and they'll say, wait a minute, I'm going to Florida. It's not even income tax there. I'm going to some other state with a lower income tax. Aren't you afraid of losing that revenue, which then de facto you don't have the revenue to do the things, the progressive things you want to do?
Well, it just so happens that New Jersey Policy Perspective has done this research. This is a good question,
and
right?
By the way, check out our New Jersey Policy Perspective interview. Who's the executive director we just had on?
Brendan McCoy.
He checked out, yeah, McCoy was on
so
with us.
they do great research on this, and they've shown that even when you raise taxes on the highest income people, so we're talking about like a super small number of people in the state of New Jersey, they don't leave. That actually they stay. They're not going to leave for Florida or Montana. A lot of them commute and work in New York. They don't leave. They stay and they pay those taxes, and it's not a big deal. And you see a net gain in revenue, not a net loss.
Why do you think it has been so difficult to pass a millionaire's tax in New Jersey with a Democratic governor, a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic State Assembly?
That is a great question for the legislature.
Well, what do you think?
I think that it's...
Well, I've asked Senate President to check out our Sweeney interview. He said, look, I was for it before.
Yes, 5 times.
Okay, but here's what he says. I'm not here to make his case, but this is what he said. He said, after President Trump, and I don't imagine you're a fan.
I'm not a fan.
After President Trump and the Republicans in Congress decided to limit state and local tax deductions, your state income taxes, your property taxes, you put them together, 10 grand, that's it. You can't deduct any more than that. Sweeney says, the Senate president said, well, after that, how are you going to increase taxes on millionaires when you've got this other situation that hurts so many New Jerseyans?
Because the Trump tax cuts overall still benefit the highest, wealthiest people in New Jersey. So they're still making out okay, even with the SALT deduction. Adding this tiny millionaire's tax isn't going to change the equation for them.
You really, and you, by the way, if the millionaire's tax does not happen, we're doing this on the, what's the date, guys? The 18th? Listen, who knows whether the date's going to be open after July 1st.
I know.
You can see that? My fingers are crossed right there. But the reality is, say the millionaire's tax is not in there, what happens?
That is a good question. Then I think that there is, so you're saying the budget is signed and then there's no millionaire's tax?
Well, yeah, because otherwise the government doesn't reopen and all kinds of bad things happen.
Scenario has a signed budget with no millionaire's tax.
Yes.
So what that does is put New Jersey in a very precarious fiscal situation moving forward. One of the problems New Jersey has had is that we budget for 1 year at a time, and we don't have sustainable revenue. And sustainable revenue allows us to make our credit rating better, which was totally hammered under Christie. It allows us to make long-term investments in things like transit and college, and it allows us to plan for the future. And so I think, yeah, we could shove this budget in right at the last second at the buzzer and make it happen, but it doesn't solve the bigger structural problems that this is not how budget negotiations should happen. They shouldn't happen where a bill is introduced, zips through the committee on Monday without the bill even being open to the public, those debates happening in the public square, and then hurried up and voted on in the full legislature by Thursday. That is not a good process. So it's no wonder New Jersey is in dire fiscal straits.
If you're listening to us on the audio side, radio side, Sue Altman, State Director, New Jersey Working Families. Question. So to what degree do you believe Governor Phil Murphy is the person to make this happen? Because to date it has not.
To make what happen?
to make the kinds of things you're talking about happen, because the resistance on the part of Democratic leadership in the legislature has been strong and consistent.
It has been strong and consistent, and I put the blame on them. I mean, Governor Murphy has the merits on his side. So whether we're talking the millionaire's tax, whether we're talking the EDA scandal, which that report just dropped yesterday, that's a big story.
You're talking about the economic. We actually taped today an interview with Tim Sullivan, who's the head of the Economic Development Authority. Let me ask you a question.
Anti-corruption. So I think that the governor has the facts on his side. So I think he's done a great job putting this case in front of New Jersey residents.
Interesting, again, we're not here to defend the EDA, and I've disclosed that we have a collaboration with them on our innovation initiative. But you just used the word corruption very comfortably and easily.
I sure did.
There's been no court case that have determined that there is, in fact, corruption. There's no criminal case. There's no prosecution taking place in that regard.
Well, there's a whole lot of smoke.
But you're awfully comfortable, respectfully, using that term. So my question is, beyond what happens in the courts, beyond what happens in the legislative and the governor's investigation of this, where do you believe, big picture, policy-wise, because we don't do petty politics and who's fighting with whom in South Jersey and the governor.
Good, I'm relieved to hear that.
Well, that's not our thing.
Good.
But our larger question is, where do you believe the place for tax incentives, tax credits really is when it comes to driving economies that otherwise would have a hard time, like Camden and other places?
Yeah, so I think that tax incentives can be used very surgically, very specifically around programs that are geared towards the communities they seek to benefit.
For example?
For example, I'll give you a counterexample first, and then I'll give you a positive example. So an example of what that isn't is the Economic Opportunity Act. So when you decide you're going to put over $1 billion of investment in tax incentive allocation to the waterfront and to big corporations in Camden, there is just, no one's explained to me a theory of change that gets us from how putting $1 billion on the waterfront in shiny new buildings gets to helping people in Camden's neighborhoods.
You don't think it's paid off?
No, absolutely not. And I don't think I don't think we have the evidence yet to sort of say either way, but no, I don't think it's paid off at all. I don't think there's any good researcher or community development expert who would say that this is how you develop a community. So to get back to your first question of what good community development looks like, it looks like investing in public education. It looks like investing in small business owners. It looks like investing in property owners in these distressed communities so that they can also realize the American dream after decades of disinvestment. That's what good economic tax incentives and other programs can do that are about community development.
Why don't you do this for us? Why don't you agree, hopefully, that you'll come back and actually have a spirited and respectful and civil debate conversation with someone who sees tax incentives, not the stuff going on in the news every day with petty personality stuff, but rather a public policy debate on the appropriate role of tax incentives. You willing to do that?
I'd be absolutely thrilled to do that. And I think we need to not renew this tax incentive program until we have that debate in the public square.
Let's have that conversation.
Thank you so much,
This
Steve.
is Sue Altman, State Director, New Jersey Working Families, an important organization, very much a part of the conversation of public policy in the state. This is State of Affairs. I'm Steve Adubato. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
State of Affairs with Steve Adubato is a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 30 years of broadcast excellence. Funding for this edition of State of Affairs with Steve Adubato has been provided by Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, Hackensack Meridian Health, New Jersey Sharing Network, Community Food Bank of New Jersey, Valley Bank, NJ Best, New Jersey's 529 College Savings Plan, and by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Promotional support provided by New Jersey Monthly and by Jaffe Communications,